The Community Music School in Springfield is preparing to present a play that touches on the opioid crisis with performers who've been directly affected by it. On February 12th, the cast of Improbable players will present I'll Never Do That, and Carolee McGrath sat down with the play's co-director Andy Short to learn more.
We use theater to teach about addiction, and the way that we do that is we create plays based on people's real stories. So what folks will see is based on real stories, and they're acted out by people in recovery themselves. So it's important to us to also provide jobs for people in recovery. It's one of the few jobs where that needs to be on your resume to get in. And so what the actual play is about, it's about how the opioid epidemic starts and how it starts for individual people. So there's a story about a young lady who she started with her mom didn't want to deal with her crying when she was 8 years old, and so gave her a sedative to go to sleep, and that's how her addiction started. And then it runs the gamut, right, from someone who has a surgery and gets overprescribed to other people that start maybe more traditionally with weed or alcohol. And so we show those stories, and then we show at the end the actors get to talk about how they got help themselves.
Okay, and this is going to be at the Community Music School in Springfield, so it's a community-wide production.
Exactly, so it's open to anyone, it's free. There's a link on our website and that we're sending around, and I believe Community Music School of Springfield also has it available, and it's at 7 o'clock. So we encourage everyone to come out. We perform it from 6th grade through college, and I think having adults and having that intergenerational kind of conversation is really important. So,
okay, you talked a little bit about all of the actors are in recovery, which means you're in recovery. Tell me a little bit about your story and how you got involved.
So I grew up in Lexington. My parents worked for the post office, pretty normal upbringing, didn't have a lot of addiction that I saw, right? And so when I got to college and my addiction started taking off, my drug of choice was weed. And alcohol, ultimately. I didn't know what to do, and I went to college to be an actor, and then dropped out of college from being an actor because of that, and ultimately was able to get help through various resources at the school I was going to. And the thing about me, kind of fast forward a couple years, is I think a lot of people who are in recovery have this experience where I was working at a Starbucks, and like, no knock on Starbucks, great job, but was not fulfilling to me. And so I'm sitting on the stoop of this Starbucks, like 3 years sober, and just kind of miserable. Like I didn't feel like there was like any purpose to what I was doing. And the problem for people like me when that happens is we're more likely to use again and relapse. And so for me, that was a really dangerous thing. And I get this call from this woman who found me somehow. I think a friend had known that I had done theater and told her, and she was the executive director of Improbable Players. And I started performing in schools and talking about my story and using this thing that I love and this thing that was key to my recovery and bringing them together, and that honestly has kept me sober for it's been almost 9 years now.
Is it hard for you to get up there? Are there any times when you're up there that something that you say or a question that is asked will reopen an old wound?
No, that's not my experience. And part of that is because we don't perform our own stories. While there is that kind of authenticity of the piece is true and we have this experience, we don't want people to kind of be going through that, right? So that's kind of a different kind of theater, and that's not my experience. When it is hard is when a kid comes up to, but also rewarding, is when a kid comes up to me after and says, you know, that's just like my brother. Mm-hmm. I had a girl come up to me one of my first shows, and she was crying, and she said, that's just like my brother, we don't know what to do. And we were able to hook her up with the counselor at the school and get her some help, and that's kind of like a great outcome in terms of what we're doing, but also just, you know, it's like anyone else. It's like, what do you say sometimes? You know?
Right. You were talking a little bit also about how you started probably the pressure of being and performing in New York and in college, and you said it was beer and weed. Do you feel like there are, certain drugs of choice that become a gateway, or do you think, based on your experience with the different actors that you work with, that it's sort of a different path for people?
Yeah, so I kind of have two answers to that. So one is, I think as adults, we have to think about the language we use, and when young people hear the word gateway, often it shuts off the conversation for them right away. So we're careful about that. The other thing is, because what they hear with gateway is, if I smoke weed, I'm going to do heroin, and they're like, I don't believe that, right? And often it's not true, right? But my experience was that it's the impact the substance has on my life, right? I know people who smoke weed and they're fine and they do it recreationally and I guess as you would describe normally, and then I have my experience, which is it was a deadly drug to me. It brought me to the depths of depression that I'd never experienced before.
Some people in your position who are in recovery, who go out and talk to kids in schools, and we've interviewed them, will really try to encourage kids, listen, stay away. Certainly because you're underage, number one, right? But also because, maybe you're trying to fill a void that it doesn't need to be filled with that.
Sure, and I should qualify everything I just said with the fact that what we know, what most of the research shows is that when you introduce substances to a developing brain, just in general, it's not a good call, right? Like the outcomes tend to be poorer for people that do that, especially on a regular basis. So we always, in all our workshops, whenever we go and speak anywhere or perform, we always encourage folks to at least wait, right? Wait till you're 25, till your brain's fully grown before you start experimenting. Because that's based on like the science that we have, right?
Exactly. And given, of course, the opioid epidemic and all the attention that it's gotten, what kind of response do you get from parents that you might meet out on different performances?
One of the most eye-opening things is when, and we get this from teachers a lot who are often also parents, is we ask at the end of each show who here thinks they might know someone who has a problem, right? Because a big part of our work is not just talking to the kids who might have a problem, it's talking to the kids who know those kids and how do you help them, right? How do you have a conversation that's actually helpful as opposed to confrontational? So when we ask that question, we get routinely 80% of the audience with their hands up of kids. And I think when adults see that, it's deeply moving. Because it's not, I think we have an idea of like, maybe my kid doesn't really know about that stuff.
Right, that's not going to touch our family.
Exactly, and that breaks down right there.